Star Wars Outlaws is another video game fire, something that, in a world of different matchsticks being held, I feel like Ubisoft have a flamethrower, and it's been a little while since they've turned it on. But we're going to get to hands-on stuff because we're both playing it. But Star Wars Outlaws is extremely buggy over on the PlayStation 5. People sharing various animations, showing that if you do like things like a stealth takedown or a climbing animation, your character K will just warp across the map and maybe being put in front of a guard that you were trying to avoid because it is a stealth-based game or whatever. And Ubisoft have then got out there, and the game is so buggy on PlayStation 5 that they are recommending players delete their saves in the early access edition, which means that the people who paid the most for the game, over £100, I think it's £120 for the Ultimate Edition, have got clearly the worst experience. A lot of people over on Twitter/X reporting that they're losing 15 to 17 hours worth of game time. Obviously, the most hardcore fans have been playing since the midnight launch. And it just sucks. Like, you've also got Ubisoft out there, because all of this was communicated in an email. Obviously, they want to try and mitigate the spread of this stuff. So they have emailed the affected players, but by the majority, it's anybody who was playing early access on PS5. They got out there and said that, you can keep playing if you want, but unfortunately, you will face issues and progression blockers. So at some point, your game will stop anyway, which sucks. So they said you have to restart. They have apologized, and they are offering an in-game trinket that you can put on your bike, so that's nice. I think they've offered some Ubisoft Connect points as well, but if anyone can answer what the hell Ubisoft Connect even is, then that'll be nice. But we'll get the hands-on stuff in a bit, but thoughts on the State of the Union?
Scott, if that happened to me and I had paid all of that money for the Ultimate Edition of the game to play it early, and I got 15 hours in, 20 hours in, hell, even 5 hours in, and I got that email telling me that I would need to reset all of my progress and start again, I think, genuinely, maybe I wouldn't mean it in the long term, but in the moment, I'd be swearing off Ubisoft games entirely. Yeah. I'd be like, I am not buying another one of these games because it's just another example of the most passionate fans and consumers getting the absolute worst deal. Like, you think if you're paying that much money, I know part of it is to access the game early, but you've got to make sure if you're Ubisoft that game works, that you're not going to be selling something at a even more premium price point that then just completely breaks after a day of use. It reminds me of Battlefield 2042 a few years ago when that launched in early access on, I think that was EA Play, and that had similar issues where you were getting the earliest version of the game for a higher price, and you were getting the worst version of it with the worst hit markers, with the worst connective issues. And it's like if anything, sell the early version cheaper, because people are more or less just playtesting it at that point.
Well, that's
right?
literally what this is at this point, where it's like, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's always the case, especially in the modern gaming industry, that the most dedicated fans are the most screwed over. But the amount of money that is behind this, the fact that it is such a massive IP, like this does have, a very, big appeal kind of thing. And I want to get to the positives for it, because I know, like, yeah. I quite like the game overall, even though it is Ubisoft AF, and Ubisoft are just the fast food of gaming. But at the same time, it's such a shame. And it's also worth clarifying that the PlayStation 5 version, the really, really buggy one, is one software update behind the Xbox version. Over on Eurogamer, they compared the two versions when they were reviewing the game, and the Xbox one was like 1.003 as opposed to the 0.2 that is on PlayStation. So it does seem like Ubisoft, for whatever reason, just missed that essential update for the game before. They just couldn't hit their deadline, which is another thing, like for the longest time, there's always that idea of pay a bit more and play a few days early. And besides the fact that you're getting the worst version of the game because it's going to be patched anyway, there is that, you're inviting this stuff kind of thing. Like, it's never the consumer's fault, but you're inviting it on the production side, where you're cutting things off even more. And this is just an example of that.
100%. I'm not necessarily torn on it. I do think, there's an element of, well, if you're buying a game early from a studio like Ubisoft that has a history of releasing things buggy at launch, like, in a way you kind of are expected to do your due diligence in, I can't even pronounce that, I'm feeling getting your illness, Scott, to understand what you're getting, right, and to understand that you're taking a risk. So I get people who might say that about the people who have spent all of this money on the earliest edition. At the same time, I don't think that absolves the studios of the responsibility of shipping a working game. Like, I don't think it's a situation that we just should accept because we've had so many examples of it. Like, it's a situation that, yeah, you might see coming if you've been burnt before, but you shouldn't have to spend that much money and roll the dice on whether or not you're going to get a product that works and doesn't just completely mess you over despite you paying more money. That's the thing I just can't get over, no matter who the company is, whether it is Ubisoft, whether it is EA, whether it's Sony, whether it's Microsoft. Like, there's a level of expectation from the consumer of quality that just hasn't been there for years now. Like you rightly said, this stuff goes back 10, if not 15, 20 years now.
Well, that's my thing, is that like that due diligence thing is interesting because that felt like it came up when Fallout 4 came out back in 2015. It was like, well, you know, it's a Bethesda game, and it's like, but what we say that as people who know, and it's like, if you're a regular gamer, you follow the industry, you kind of know that reputation. But at some point, to me, consumer law comes in, and it's a product being sold. Like, and you're better off knowing what you're going in for, but there's no way that you should have to go and like be like, well, it's an Ubisoft game, let me hedge my bets kind of thing. Like, they're advertising it, they're an official company. Like, how hard is it to just deliver on the thing that you're saying you're going to do? And I get that in the fine print they're covered in regards to, it's a tech product and things like that. But I don't know, man, it's an abysmal showing for something that has been in development for quite some time, and it's still quite an ambitious project in regards to the different things that it's trying. But do you want to transition into the hands-on stuff? Or?
Yeah, let's do it, because it is a shame. I thought we were going to come in today and kind of do a video like this where we kind of got to talk about the things we love about the game, and it's such a shame that this is just casting such a long shadow on it, because it does absolutely suck and there's no defending it. But at the same time, I've been playing on an Xbox, I know you have, actually playing it via Ubisoft Plus, which I was
going to say, shout out to Ubisoft Plus Premium.
I've been screaming this from the treetops to anyone who will listen, because Scott Tilford told me that not only could I play Star Wars Outlaws for $14.99 if I buy Ubisoft Plus on the Xbox, but I get to play the earliest version of it, and it actually works on the Xbox, unlike the PlayStation 5. So this isn't me shilling for Ubisoft Plus, but if you wanted to try out a game like this and didn't want to pay £70 like I wasn't going to, it's been a great entry point. And to me, for that price especially, it's kind of been a steal. I've really enjoyed my time with it. I'm very early on in the game. There's a lot of stuff that I don't like. I don't necessarily disagree with the reviews that are calling it a 7 out of 10 experience, again, at least so far. But considering the low expectations I sort of had for it, I am enjoying, in particular, the world and the characters and the presentation of it. I'm not a scoundrel Star Wars guy. That part
I started
of the
to hate that word. I hate that. Oh, they're a scout. What does it even mean? What does that even mean?
I don't know, but it's never been a part of the universe that's really appealed to me. So again, that had it kind of working against it for me. But even that, I've kind of gone into it, and we'll talk about the faction system in more detail soon. But that side of things, playing these different outlaw factions against each other, Kay, the main character's role in that, and her learning to operate in this world, all of that stuff has surprisingly hit.
Well, that's my thing with trying to focus on the positives. And yes, like, that's the thing, to be completely crystal clear with the Ubisoft Plus Premium thing. I did not realize that you can just get that for a month for £15, and they're putting Star Wars Outlaws on it. I think the premium tier, because it's only available on Xbox and PC, it's not on PlayStation. But if you get Ubisoft Plus Premium for a month, you then get Star Wars Outlaws, the Early Access Edition, for that £15, and you can just cancel. I'm literally just going to cancel it in a month. I don't know if Ubisoft are going to demonetize this video for being so brash.
It's their service.
Literally, it's their service. But like, being just so wanton with like, hey, just get a month of this thing. No one's going to play an Ubisoft game for more than a month anyway, unless that is the one game you get for the most of the rest of the year. So you might as well do that as well if you want to just dip your toes in. But yeah, that was how I managed to get on it. But I think for me, like, it is an Ubisoft game 101. It is Ubisoft's take on Uncharted, essentially, in terms of the way that it plays, the way that you mantle around different environments, doing the Drake climbing. And the other interactive element is that you use your character Nyx, the little axolotl style creature, to interact with the environment, which is very like Watch Dogs. You're just looking at things in the environment. And Nyx can do everything. Nyx can trigger barrels to explode, can push buttons, can knock different parts of the base's electricity off, things like that when you're infiltrating different spaces. So it is literally the meshing of Uncharted and Watch Dogs in a Star Wars wrapper. But you do also have speeder bike stuff in between different locations and some kind of flat chase sequences. Like the AI is terrible, and you can kind of just stand in front of them for the most part, and they'll just miss. So I wonder if that's going to get patched as well. And then the third pillar of the game is the spaceship combat, which is quite basic. It's not that far off the Starlink game that Nintendo did it back in. Nintendo did. They'd partnered with Nintendo for the Star Fox stuff. Back in 2017, 2018, just arbitrary, the spaceship combat stuff. I like that. I'm gonna like all of this sounds like a massive negative. I like the ambition that's here, and I think the sense of place is incredible. I think it's the best sense of place for a Star Wars game since like KOTOR. But in terms of exploring environments and the level of detail that's there, but it's put through the Ubisoft filter, and you know, if you've done the due diligence like you mentioned before, you know exactly what this game is.
Yeah, I'd fully agree there. If you go back to the preview videos we've done on this game, where we've looked at the trailers and studied some of the hands-on preview stuff that's been released, all the gameplay so far, like my biggest fear was that it was going to be too ambitious for its own good, and that while a lot of the systems in the game sounded great, I was worried that they were going to ultimately be a little bit shallow. And I think the reality is that is the case in the final game. Like you said, the speeder chases are fine, but there's not much to them. Same with the ship combat, and even the shooting itself is pretty straightforward, not too dissimilar to Watch Dogs, which was kind of surprising because this is the team that made The Division and not Watch Dogs, so it's weird that it skews so far towards a different franchise under the Ubisoft umbrella. But that said, while it is kind of flat in that regard, I do think it's satisfying enough, especially with the stealth. I didn't realize how much of a stealth game it was going to be, and you kind of are just doing the Watchdog things of, you're crawling around mid-sized tables, you're pressing X to do canned executions, getting the tall grass, using a stun gun to take people out. But it feels good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it'll, justify itself across 40 hours, but in this early moment, in this early period with the game, there's enough there to make it satisfying, especially with Nyx, like you said, because it is like executing some of the hacks in Watch Dogs, but it fits with the universe and it fits with the character to kind of have Nyx distract someone, you come in, wallop them in the face, go into a hidden area and kind of like steal something. That small scale scoundrel behavior is something I didn't know I wanted, but I actually prefer that within the context of the game rather than it being all out action, all out shooting all of the time. Because go on, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say the thing is, like, it's at its best when you're doing the more curated parts of it, and the more you get lost in the open world is where it starts to fall apart, because then you notice all the AI issues, and it feels like the wanted system was maybe just put in there as an arbitrary thing that people will expect from an open world game, and because you do have, like, speeder bikes in the Empire, like, patrolling around, you can shoot them, you can have a wanted level go up in the corner, but that's about it. Like, the AI is terrible, so if you just, like, duck into some grass or around a corner, you'll hear their comms say, like, we've lost sight of her, we don't know where she's gone, and then you just reset again. Or you can hack a thing to reset it altogether. But that stealth stuff, I think it's worth saying that, like, you can sort of experiment, and do, like, chess moves to get through certain areas, where it's like a couple of guards, I'm going to distract one of them with Nyx, I'm going to clobber the other guy, I'm going to grab his rifle and take out 3 other dudes. Or if you get spotted, you can use Nyx to distract the person who's spotting you, then run in and take them out. There is a bit more of an improvisational flow to it. Like, it's not as arbitrary as, because a comparison is the MJ stealth sections in Spider-Man. In terms of just, like, using your stun gun over and over again, which I barely did the one-hit knockout button, because there's, like, a recharge thing. I would rather get in there and do a takedown. And also some of the moves that you're unlocking are, like, straight-up Han Solo type stuff. Like, you're getting the ability to put your hands up and walk towards Stormtrooper or enemies. And then take out 3 or 4 dudes at once using the Splinter Cell mark and execute thing. So I think all of that together, it doesn't necessarily give it an identity because it is so fundamentally cribbed from everything else. But those systems are enjoyable. I mean, it's really, like I said, Ubisoft are fast food. Like, it's literally just like, I like a cheeseburger, I like some fries, I like a shake. Like, that's literally what this is. It
is funny though, isn't it? Because like you said, to me, honestly, like, the stealth isn't that too dissimilar to the MJ missions, especially in Spider-Man 2, in terms of, how kind of canned and straightforward it all feels. Like you are just pressing X to do a really canned takedown, or even the Nick stuff is really you're kind of watching the same animation play out. But the difference is, like you said, the ability to, pretend to surrender and then get the drop on enemies. Those upgrades and those abilities are full of so much personality that you kind of, I don't know, I forgive it a little bit more because it's at least, like I said, informing the character and informing the world in a way. And it's kind of fun to do that and role play as this kind of, mercenary sneaking their way through compounds. And it's like that gives it at least a visual edge that makes it different from the MJ missions in terms of how repetitive they could be and what you were doing over and over again. Again, it doesn't make it the best game of the year so far. It doesn't make it the most complex stealth system, but it makes it way more enjoyable than I kind of anticipated it being, especially off the reviews.
Yeah, and I think as well, like to me, the visuals do quite a lot of heavy lifting. Like, I do love that sense of place. It's to me, it's a bit similar to Andor in terms of like you've really thought about how all of this world works away from the standard stories of the movies. And like obviously the movie timeline stuff, everyone knows those stories, everyone knows those characters. They're simplistic things that they're fundamentally made to be hero stories. And it's like this fiction, you could argue, back in the day was never meant to be this detailed. It was never meant to be bigger than just those characters doing those things. So for me, when you spend this much time fleshing out, well, this is how all the crime syndicates work, and they all interact and talk to each other. There are brokers and different missions, and you can betray people. And then you add on that level of detail, and also little things that I really think are worth shouting out and are really massive positives, where you can tell that this was made with a soul, where you can play Sabak, which is like the in-world version of poker, essentially. There are arcade machines that you can play. There's custom music in the game that is like done as if it was it's in-world music kind of thing on the jukebox. And I think that those are the extra level touches where like the developers were able to put extra bits in here rather than just follow the brief kind of thing. And you kind of see that dueling thing of like, you've got the Ubisoft follow the template, this is what will sell, and then you've got the creative team going, well, wouldn't it be cool if we did XYZ thing and then just mesh it all together? And that does result in quite a buggy product, at least on PlayStation 5, and different elements that are a bit disparate, like the wanted level systems and everything else. But I do see the vision and I do enjoy it. And I have enjoyed it. I've put about 3.5 hours into it, and I'm having a thoroughly good time with it. But that comes with the caveat that you need to just like accept the low-hanging fruit that is the Ubisoft's approach to gaming, and then I cherry pick the stuff that's new, but it's very formulaic overall.
Yeah, it's an Ubisoft game. It's a game that I can compliment, but with every compliment there is a second half of the sentence that is a criticism alongside it. Like you mentioned the presentation there. It is at once a beautiful game and a game that looks like ass. I was playing it last night, man, after indulging in a lot of Hunt Showdown, which is a CryEngine game, and the next gen update for that is absolutely beautiful. Like unreal character models, unreal lighting, everything meshes into an artistic vision that is just spectacular. And then I go to Star Wars Outlaws, which has flourishes, but I think, like you said, it always feels like the developer's ambition is brushing up against maybe even just the game engine in what that can achieve. When you're on the speeder out in the open world, it looks all right. It looks okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't
look.
It
looks pretty good.
Oh, it's not a patch to me on Star Wars Jedi Survivor from just last year. I know that game ran like ass as well, but in terms of like raw visuals and graphical fidelity, I did see people comparing the facial animations to Mass Effect Andromeda.
The facial animations of the open world are horrific.
Yeah,
there's a very night and day split between the specific cutscenes, the main story cutscenes, and then the ones that you just almost feel AI generated. Like they're terrible.
Well, even that, man, like I really like Kay as a character, and I actually really love I don't know who is the performer, but I think the voiceover is like really good, really full of personality, a lot of different emotions, great range. I'm really liking that element of it, but it's let down, in my opinion, by the facial tech, even on Kay in the main cutscenes, where it's just like sometimes a little bit off. It's not just her, it's the other characters as well, but you can see the devs kind of punching through and, making some great individual scenes. Some look amazing. Some look like you're watching, like a Star Wars animated show or one of the TV shows. But there's always another one that brings you right back down to earth and just is janky and is wonky and looks like Mass Effect Andromeda in a way. So it's a frustrating
Everyone's
game in that
face is
regard.
tired.
Yeah. It's a frustrating game in that regard because there's, like you said, there's so many great things when it works, but it then kind of falls down immediately in the next scene, and that is, I don't know what that is, because I don't think it's a I don't know, maybe it is a developer issue, but there's so many cool flourishes in there. There's so much soul, like you mentioned. I got a scene last night where you do a mini game with Nyx, where you're having something to eat, and it's just like a little great moment within this massive Star Wars universe that manages to like humanize this character and create that sense of place you were talking about. But then you're out in the open world and you're doing, Imperial checkpoints, and the grass, the foliage is popping in, and you're seeing like the little aberrations around the water in the background, and it's just it doesn't feel next gen in that way for me.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm curious to see how it goes after the PlayStation 5 patch, and then just in general, like if people start sharing more images of it online and stuff. Because to me, the skybox is doing quite a lot of the heavy lifting in the open world space. Especially if you go in the photo mode, you can change the time of day. You can see that there's an entire planetary cycle going on around you, which I think is really cool. So for me, there have been those pretty much like the wow moments where I've gone, oh, this looks gorgeous. Like it does feel like I'm playing in it. Those really old, original Star Wars novels. So like you kind of think back on like sort of 70s, 80s sci-fi books with lots of giant planets and whatever. It's like it's that original vision of sci-fi from the 70s that Star Wars used to always like pull from. I kept thinking of that, and I was like, this is like a swashbuckling, light-hearted kind of tone. And I think for something like Star Wars has struggled so much with its tone, and it tries to be everything. And Andor was my favorite Star Wars thing since Rogue One, and that's completely straight and serious and whatever. But I think there's a way to do the sort of lighthearted stuff and have the hyper-colored skybox and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I am not that you're saying there's not, but that was the thing that kind of maybe papered over the rest of it for me. Like, I didn't notice the pop in, I didn't notice the issues with the water, stuff like that. But it is interesting. It is almost like a game of two halves, and I'm curious about the development of it. Like, did it start as a more story-based single-player thing with more levels and set pieces, like Uncharted, and then did it become this open-world thing where we might as well do it? Because if we can say it's Star Wars GTA, and that'll sell, and we should put that in. Because it's the two sides do clash, and you don't even remember about the open world stuff when you're on mission. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's like Arkham City in a way, where you're sort of like linking authored pieces of content together with this more barren open space.
I told you before we started recording, but the game that reminds me most of, apart from the obvious Ubisoft ones, is Gotham Knights, where that had so much going for it, especially in terms of the presentation. The characters were really nicely written, good cutscenes, but it was just lacking that little bit of polish, that little bit of cohesion that pulled everything together, and was primarily, in my opinion, let down by the actual gameplay in a similar way where Outlaws feels that way too, where I can look at everything else and really appreciate it, and I like the gameplay, but it just isn't of the level, I don't think, that I would necessarily want kind of from a game like this. I don't know. It's a weird one, man. It is, and I feel like I'm just kind of sat here sort of slagging it off, but there is a lot that I like with it. But at the same time, if I had paid 70 quid for it, I probably wouldn't have been as generous, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost like the caveat is always there's always a caveat on something like Game Pass, where it's a good Game Pass game.
Yeah.
The idea being that you're paying a lesser amount of subscription fee, and that offsets the value proposition. I think it's the same thing here. This is a good Game Pass game. This is a good subscription fee game.
Yes.
It clearly, factually, is not worth the higher price, at least right now. But if you do the Ubisoft Plus hack, let's say, for £15 or £16, that's a way to get by.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to end on a really negative note, I guess, because it's just popped in my mind. But I think what kind of kills it, well, not even necessarily kills it, but gives you a nagging sense, or at least gives me a nagging sense of frustration and unfulfilled potential, is that it's, like you said, cribbing from a lot of games. There's lots of comparisons to Uncharted and even Watch Dogs. But the issue for me is that the bits that feel like Uncharted feel light years away from what was achieved in Uncharted 4 like a decade ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even
or Uncharted 2,
Uncharted 2 or Uncharted 3, like the rope swinging feels all right, but it doesn't feel anywhere near as good as the rope swinging Uncharted 4 way back when, right? And it's kind of similar with Watch Dogs. There's not as much of a gulf, but you compare the stealth to the stealth in Watch Dogs, and Watch Dogs had a bit more going for it, a bit more free. It was a bit more free form. It had more abilities. So that's kind of, I think, the one thing I keep coming back to, that is, for as much fun as I'm having, it cribs from so many games that are just, in my opinion, fundamentally better than it, that you can't get away from that sense that you kind of just could be playing something else. But like I said, that is at least buoyed by the care and attention that's in the actual world and the mini games and the activities and the characters. So maybe it'll flatten out. I kind of worry because I'm enjoying it right now. But like I said at the very start, how does this hold up for 40 hours? How does it hold up for 30 hours? Am I going to be as positive if the gameplay doesn't really evolve across that time? Or will the story be good enough to keep me hooked? That's the exciting part going forward, I think.
I'll be amazed if... I'm curious. What finishes first? This video game? Do I hit credits, or my Ubisoft Plus subscription next month? Like, that's the cutoff to pay more money towards this. But we'll see.